Whether you need chord progressions for your own song or an intro for a song that you have to play, you want to be able to come up with chord progressions that sound great, natural and not too boring. And messing around with harmony to make beautiful chord progressions is one of the most fun and creative things to do in music. That's what I want to talk about in this video. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. The chord progressions are supposed to loop, so we can start by just choosing 2 chords and then fill in more chords as a way of embellishing them. For most of this video, I'm going to focus on progressions going from a 1 or a tonic chord to a 4 or a subdominant chord, mostly because there's more variation possible here and they are also a little bit overlooked. Let's first check out some options for 2 chord vamps, and there you can already maybe get some inspiration and some new ideas for stuff that you can work with in your own music. These already sound great, so the next thing is just to add a little bit more movement so that it becomes more like a story, so there's more development going from one chord to the other. The trick to creating these progressions is to get them to make sense by adding chords that move in a logical way. I'm not using any exact science or strict rules, so you can use any type of system that sounds natural to you. Most of the time you will see me add chords based on common progressions like a standard 1-6-2-5 turnaround, some stepwise movement, or moving in fourth intervals. When I'm coming up with the chord progressions, I'm still pretty much relating everything to the key of C major. So I am in general pulling from C major and C minor. That will give me these diatonic chords to use. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, B half diminished. C minor 7, D half diminished, E flat major 7, F minor 7, G minor 7, A flat major 7, B flat 7. Harmonic minor, C minor major 7, D half diminished, E flat major 7 sharp 5, F minor 7, G7, A flat major 7, B diminished. And melodic minor, C minor major 7, D minor 7, E flat major 7 sharp 5, F7, G7, A half diminished, and B half diminished. And besides that, you can of course add secondary dominants everywhere. So if you have a D minor 7, you can add an A7 flat 9 to lead to that. Or if you have an A flat major 7, so the flat 6 from minor, you can also use an E flat 7 to take you there. If you want to check out more about secondary dominants, then I have a video on that. There's a link in the description of this video. Here I'm going to A minor 7 after the C major 7. That's really just coming out of a standard turnaround. And from there it's just stepwise movement, but you might also want to notice how the G7 sus4 is in fact an F with the G in the bass, and that sort of makes it a 4-4 minor progression going from that G sus4 to F minor 6. Using the 4 minor chord as a way of getting back to the tonic and just having that loop is actually something that's fairly common also in pop music. I think the most famous example is probably Radiohead's song Creep. With a dominant chord, you can often add a 2 chord in front of it to make it a 2-5. And in this case, adding the F minor 7 in front of B flat 7, we also get the option to have a secondary dominant, which is a C7 over E. Another nice way to tie everything together is to have a pedal point in the harmony, so a note that stays the same throughout the entire progression. And in this example, I'm using a G as a top note in the melody to really have that effect. example, I'm using stepwise motion to go from C major 7 to A flat major 7. And you can do this in a few different ways, but in this case, I opted for having the B flat 7 in there. Also just because it's sort of a nice step to the minor key and just a little bit more variation than just having a G over B or maybe a B half diminished chord there. Instead of using stepwise motion, you can also turn it into sort of a chain of dominance, and that would be this progression. And this is of course a pretty different sound, but dominant chains are really strong moving progressions that can work really well, even if they are maybe sometimes a little bit too obvious to have as vamps that are repeated a lot. Coming up with chord progressions is about composing and improvising with chords. So the best way to do this is just really to mess around, try a lot of things, figure out what you like and figure out what sounds good. The sharp 4 chord is an uncomfortable chord for a lot of people, but it is a beautiful sound. And here are two examples that work really well and both use a C pedal point. The second one is a bit dark and also maybe a bit out there, but it is really beautiful. This is really just a basic C, C7, F to F sharp diminished gospel or country progression that you find everywhere. Here I have a C in the bass, and that makes it a little bit different or a little bit less obvious, but it still works. And it's also a great example of what you can learn from checking out songs like St. Thomas or Rhythm Changes. The next one is a little bit more dark and a little bit more spicy, but really sounds great. The first progression with the F sharp diminished was sort of set up in a very natural, very major sounding way with the C and the C7 and on the basic F major. But here I'm going straight to C minor, so I'm starting on the C major 7, but then through an E flat 7, going directly to A flat major 7, still with a C pedal point, and from there going into the F sharp diminished chord. And that makes this a lot more mysterious and a lot more vague, but of course also more interesting. The 4 minor and 5 minor chords together have a real folk sound, which can be really beautiful. And I think it works really great here in the combination with the A flat 7, which has the heaviest name in terms of theory that we have in this entire video.
Difficult subjects, the double diminished.
You'll also see the double diminished sharp 4 chord referred to as a German augmented 6 chord. To me, calling it a double diminished sharp 4 tells me how it sounds. That's why I use that. I don't really have an association with the sound of a German augmented chord, but that is most likely just what I'm used to, and whatever you want to do is up to you. The progressions in this video are pretty natural sounding and will loop very well. Now, if you plan to make songs with the same chords looping for a longer period of time, it makes sense to not be too specific about the key. Being vague becomes a way to make it less predictable, less boring. This is actually something that is very common in pop music, and you can find long discussions and articles and lots of videos on how these chord progressions work, and also often discussions on what key a song is in. Using subdominant chords makes the progression a lot less predictable and clear than a standard 5-1. And this is of course also something that you see if you start analyzing songs like Radiohead's Creep. In this video, I'm almost only using functional harmony, and that's actually a great tool for understanding and creating chord progressions. And if you want to dig deeper into how you can work with this and what you can get out of it if you start thinking like this, then check out this video. I'm actually curious, most of the music that you play, is that tonal harmony, Or is it modal harmony? Or is it something else?